Before starting, if you want to access our exclusive BL stories, you can follow our Patreon page. Link in the channel description. So let's begin. The wolf was already bleeding when I decided to jump. Not because I was brave. Not because I had a plan. Mostly because watching something die from a safe distance had stopped feeling acceptable somewhere around my first death. The cliff edge crumbled beneath my boots. Sea spray hit my face hard enough to sting. Lightning split the horizon. And below me, wedged between black rocks where the tide was climbing fast, a massive silver-black wolf lifted its head exactly once. Its eyes found mine. Then it collapsed. I swore. The wind stole most of it. The rest disappeared beneath thunder. By the time I reached the rocks, my hands were scraped raw and my coat was soaked through. The wolf looked worse. Far worse. Blood darkened its flank. One hind leg bent at an angle nature had never intended. Its breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls. A creature that size should have frightened me. It did not. Pain looked the same on everyone. People. Animals. The dying. The abandoned. I crouched carefully. You're ugly. The wolf opened one eye. I pointed toward the sea. You should know that was a compliment. The fish are worse. Nothing. The eye closed again. Fair. I had delivered stronger material. A wave crashed against the rocks. Cold water surged around my boots. The tide was rising faster than I liked. The wolf was heavy enough to qualify as a natural disaster. I looked at the cliff. I looked at the wolf. I looked at my own very reasonable desire to survive. Then I grabbed its front legs. Fine. The wolf remained unconscious. Contribute nothing. That's also a strategy. The climb nearly killed me. Again. At one point I became convinced the universe simply disliked me on a personal level. At another point I became convinced the wolf was secretly made of stone. Neither theory could be disproven. By the time I dragged him inside the lighthouse, I was shaking hard enough that my teeth clicked together. The wolf landed beside the fireplace with a heavy thud. Rain battered the windows. Wind screamed around the tower. The old lighthouse groaned like something alive. For a few seconds, I simply sat on the floor and breathed. Salt. Smoke. Blood. And beneath it, something else. A scent. Strange. Sharp. Cold. Like snow falling onto steel. I frowned. The scent disappeared before I could identify it. Odd. Then again, most things in my life had been odd recently, including the fact that I was technically dead. Or had been. Depends how philosophical you wanted to get about it. 3 months earlier, I had died in a rain-soaked car accident. That was the official version. The less official version involved a private hospital. Missing money. Falsified reports. A conversation someone important did not want repeated. Then headlights. Then impact. Then darkness. And after that, I woke up somewhere else. Different body. Different world. Same disappointment. If you've ever survived something you weren't supposed to survive, you probably know what I mean when I say the strangest part isn't the fear. It's how quickly everyone continues without you. I discovered that twice. The first time after my death. The second after waking as Ansel Whitlock, heir to one of the Empire's oldest noble families. Former heir, technically. Current disgrace. Accused thief. Professional embarrassment. Public disappointment. The title changed depending on who was speaking. The meaning stayed the same. I stood. The wolf needed help. My personal crisis could wait. Again. I fetched bandages. Boiled water. Medicinal herbs. The small cabinet beside the stairs held most of my supplies. Not because anyone had given them to me. Because nobody else was coming. That lesson had arrived early. And stayed. The wound along the wolf's side was deep. Too deep. Someone had not merely attacked him. Someone had hunted him. The realization settled unpleasantly. I cleaned the injury carefully. The wolf never woke. Never growled. Never resisted. Only endured. I knew something about enduring. Hours passed. The storm continued. By midnight the bleeding had slowed. The fireplace crackled softly. The wolf slept, and I finally allowed myself to sit. The lighthouse had changed over the last 3 months. Not much, but enough. The first day I'd arrived, the place had looked abandoned. Dust, rotting furniture, broken windows, a noble family's version of kindness. They had not executed me. How generous. Instead they shipped me to the edge of the empire and forgot I existed. That hurt Duke Harland Whitlock's reputation less. My father preferred solutions like that. Clean, distant, convenient. The lighthouse was supposed to be punishment. Somewhere along the way it became mine. The repaired shelves. Mine. The herb garden outside. Mine. The blankets draped over old chairs. Mine. The injured seagull sleeping in a basket near the stairs. Also mine. Temporary resident. Frequently ungrateful. The bird opened one eye. Looked at the wolf. Looked at me. Then tucked its head back beneath a wing. Even the seagull had decided the wolf was my problem. Coward. I threw a small piece of bread. The bird ignored it. The disrespect in this household had become unbearable. For the first time that night, I laughed. Quietly. The sound surprised me. Not because it existed. Because it felt real. The laughter faded. Silence returned. The wolf shifted. Only slightly. But enough. I froze. The scent returned. Snow. Steel. Something unmistakably alpha. Strong. Far stronger than any ordinary alpha should have been. The realization hit a second later. I stared. The wolf. The wolf smelled like an alpha. That was impossible. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. Interesting. Fear usually moved faster. I watched him carefully. Nothing. No transformation. No explanation. Just a massive injured wolf asleep beside my fireplace. I rubbed my forehead. Perhaps exile had finally damaged my brain. Reasonable. Would explain several recent decisions. The wolf's breathing steadied. Outside, the storm began to weaken. Inside, the silence settled around us. For a moment, it felt almost peaceful. Which should have warned me. Peace rarely lasted long. The knock came just before dawn. 3 sharp impacts. Deliberate. Unwelcome. I already knew who it was. Only one person climbed to the lighthouse without permission. I opened the door. The man standing outside wore expensive clothes entirely unsuited for the weather. Corin Vale always looked like someone expecting an audience. Today was no exception. His smile arrived first. The rest of him followed. Ansel. I considered closing the door. Strongly. Instead I said, Corin. He stepped inside without invitation. Also traditional. His gaze swept across the room. The furniture. The supplies. The wolf. The smile faltered. Interesting. What's that? I looked at the wolf. Large. Corin's mouth tightened. I enjoyed that more than I should have. He turned back toward me. You missed the memorial gathering. I wasn't invited. You were. No. A pause. You were informed. That's not the same thing. The distinction irritated him. Good. Corin had always preferred conversations where reality cooperated with his version of it. Unfortunately for him, I had stopped helping. His eyes narrowed. You could make this easier. There it is. What? The reason you climbed a cliff during a storm. The smile disappeared completely. Better. Honesty improved him. What do you want, Corin? His answer arrived too quickly. Wrong. A detail slightly out of place. A response rehearsed before the conversation began. I came because people are worried. No. They weren't. Not enough to send Corin. Not enough to remember my birthday. Not enough to question the theft accusation. Definitely not enough to climb a mountain during a storm. I leaned against the doorway. Waited. Corin hated silence. 5 seconds later he proved me right. The Duke wants the family records returned. There it was. Not concern. Not reconciliation. Documents. Interesting. Very interesting. Because I did not have any family records. And suddenly I was certain someone believed I did. Behind us, the wolf stirred. A low growl vibrated through the room. Every muscle in Corin's body locked instantly. The reaction was automatic. Instinctive. Alpha fear recognizing something larger. Stronger. More dangerous. The growl stopped. The room remained silent. Corin looked toward the wolf. The wolf looked back. For one brief second, those silver eyes opened fully. Cold. Intelligent. Human. The thought flashed through me so suddenly I almost missed Corin's expression. Recognition. Not certainty. Recognition. Then it vanished. Too fast. Too controlled. But I had seen it. And for the first time since arriving in this world, I became certain the wolf was hiding something. The question was whether he knew Corin, or whether Corin knew him. Corin recovered first. I should go. That surprised me. He had not accomplished whatever he came for. Yet suddenly he wanted distance. Fast. The wolf's gaze followed him toward the door. Unblinking. Waiting. Watching. As though one wrong movement would end badly for someone. The door closed behind Corin. Silence returned. I turned slowly. The wolf was still awake. Still watching me. Still far too intelligent. Neither of us moved. Then, very carefully, the wolf lifted his head. And the scent of snow and steel filled the lighthouse again. The lighthouse had always been loud. Wind in the stone. Waves against the cliffs. Wood expanding and settling through the night. After 3 months, I knew every sound. Which meant I noticed immediately when a new one appeared. Breathing. Not wolf breathing. Human breathing. I woke before my eyes opened. A survival habit. The kind you acquire after discovering death is apparently more of a suggestion than a rule. The room was dark. The fire had burned low. And someone was sitting beside my bed. I reached beneath the pillow. My hand closed around the knife. The voice arrived first. You should keep that somewhere less obvious. Male. Deep. Calm. My eyes opened. The knife remained exactly where it was. Most thieves check under pillows first. The man sitting beside my bed looked entirely too composed for someone who had spent yesterday as a wolf. Silver black hair. Sharp cheekbones. Broad shoulders. Several fresh bandages. And eyes I recognized immediately. Storm gray. The same eyes that had watched me from the rocks. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I sat up. Good. His eyebrow lifted. Good. You're not a hallucination. That seemed to surprise him. That was your first concern. No. I pointed the knife. My first concern is whether you're about to murder me. The corner of his mouth moved. Barely. Not quite a smile. Possibly an accident. I am not. Second concern. Only second. You transformed from a wolf into a man inside my lighthouse. A pause. Faye. The knife lowered slightly. Not because I trusted him. Because if he wanted me dead, he probably could have managed it while I was asleep. Which raised several entirely different questions. Questions I intended to ask. Immediately. Name. The answer arrived without hesitation. Evander. Interesting. Not the full truth. Not exactly a lie either. I knew because I used the same technique myself. Offer enough honesty to discourage further digging. Works surprisingly often. Unfortunately for him, I had experience being difficult. Evander what? No. I stared. You answered my question with a refusal. Yes. The audacity nearly impressed me. Almost. I leaned back against the headboard. Fine. He watched me. Waiting. I watched him back. Waiting harder. 5 seconds. 10. 20. Eventually he sighed. The sound carried the exhausted resignation of a man realizing he had encountered a problem not covered by military training. Good. I enjoyed those moments. What do you want to know? Everything. No. There you are again. For the first time, that almost smile returned. Very briefly. Dangerous. The expression changed his face more than it should have. I looked away first. Annoying. The silence stretched. Then his gaze shifted toward the window. Toward the sea. Toward something beyond both. The scent changed. Snow. Steel. And something darker beneath it. Not fear. Not exactly. Memory. Loss. The realization arrived before I could stop it. He was carrying something. Something heavy. Something old. I knew that scent. Not the specific emotion. The shape of it. People abandoned by safety often smelled similar. The room grew quiet again. Then, Evander Blackmoor. The words left him softly. I froze. Even isolated on a cliff, some names traveled. Commander of the Imperial Vanguard. Hero of the Northern campaigns. The Alpha who supposedly vanished 6 months ago. The Alpha half the Empire had been searching for. The Alpha rumored dead. My eyes narrowed. His did not leave the sea. Interesting. No dramatic reveal. No expectation of admiration. Only fatigue. That made me believe him immediately. Liars usually enjoyed the performance more. I thought you were dead. So did several people. Helpful answer. I try. The dryness surprised a laugh out of me. A real one. Evander looked over. The expression on his face shifted. Just slightly. As though he had not expected that sound. Neither had I. The moment lingered. Then vanished. Because reality rarely tolerated comfort for long. A sharp knock echoed through the lighthouse. Both of us looked toward the door. 3 knocks. Fast. Urgent. Not Corin. Different rhythm. Different energy. I stood first. Evander stood immediately afterward. Too quickly for someone supposedly recovering. His body swayed. Only once. The movement lasted less than a second. Still. I noticed. He noticed me noticing. Neither of us commented. The door opened. A fisherman stumbled inside. Water dripped from his coat. Blood covered one sleeve. His face looked pale enough to qualify as supernatural. Ansel. The words came hard. Fast. Desperate. The harbor. My stomach tightened. What happened? A ship broke against the eastern reef. Behind me, Evander became very still. The fisherman swallowed. There are people trapped. No one moved. For one heartbeat. Then everyone did. Fast. The harbor sat 2 miles below the lighthouse. The storm had weakened but not disappeared. Wind still battered the coastline. Waves still struck the rocks hard enough to shake the earth. The fishing village looked wrong the moment we arrived. Too many people. Too much shouting. Too much fear. The wrecked vessel lay tilted against the reef. Half submerged. Breaking apart with every wave. Men stood knee-deep in freezing water. Ropes stretched between boats. Children cried somewhere behind the crowd. And over everything. Panic. The smell hit first. Salt. Blood. Fear. Pheromones. An omega somewhere nearby was terrified. The scent spread through the harbor like smoke. Uncontrolled. Humiliating. Public. I turned toward it automatically. A young man knelt near the docks. Maybe 19. Maybe 20. Trying desperately to stop the bleeding from an older sailor's leg. His hands shook. The sailor screamed. The omega flinched. And kept working. Something tightened in my chest. Because courage often looked exactly like that. Terrified. Shaking. Doing it anyway. I moved toward them. The omega looked up. Recognition arrived instantly. Not because he knew me. Because everyone knew the Whitlock scandal. The disgraced heir. The exile. The thief. His expression flickered. Then disappeared. Work mattered more. Good. I preferred him already. I knelt beside him. Pressure here. He obeyed instantly. The bleeding slowed. The sailor stopped screaming. Momentarily. Good. The omega blinked. You're helping. I looked at the blood covering both of us. No. This is decorative. The poor man stared. Then laughed despite himself. Only once. Enough. The tension broke. For a breath. Then the next crisis arrived. A scream erupted near the shoreline. The crowd shifted. Someone pointed toward the wreck. A child. Small. Terrified. Still trapped aboard. Damn it. The distance wasn't impossible. The timing was. Every wave pushed the ship closer to destruction. One mistake. I was already moving. So was Evander. We reached the water simultaneously. Neither of us spoke. The child screamed again. A wave struck the hull. Wood splintered. The crowd shouted. And suddenly Evander's hand closed around my wrist. Firm. Unyielding. I looked up. Storm-gray eyes met mine. For one strange second, everything else disappeared. The harbor. The crowd. The sea. Only those eyes remained. You stay here. No. The answer came immediately. He expected it. Which was irritating. I can reach him faster. So can I. You cannot swim against that current. I can try. His jaw tightened. Mine did too. Neither of us moved. The tension sharpened. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Crowds always sensed conflict. Especially between alphas and omegas. Even when neither participant wanted the attention. Then Evander leaned closer. Just enough. The scent of snow and steel wrapped around me. Protective. Possessive. Dangerously instinctive. And for the first time since meeting him, my body reacted. Heat pooled beneath my skin. Wrong. Unexpected. Unwelcome. My breath caught. Only briefly. Still. Evander noticed. His expression changed instantly. Concern. Control. Something else. Something he suppressed before I could identify it. Then he released my wrist. Stepped away. And without another word, jumped into the sea. The crowd gasped. I didn't. I was too busy staring at the place his hand had been. Because the warmth remained. Long after he was gone. And that frightened me far more than the ocean. The rescue lasted 7 minutes. It felt like an hour. When Evander emerged carrying the child, the harbor exploded into noise. Relief. Disbelief. Awe. The child clung to his neck. Refusing to let go. Reasonable. I suspected half the village felt the same. Evander carried the boy ashore. Set him gently beside his mother. The woman burst into tears. The child buried his face in her shoulder. Then pointed directly at Evander. Very seriously. That's a wolf. Silence. The entire harbor froze. I closed my eyes. Briefly. The child continued. Unaware. The big one. Another pause. I liked him better fluffy. Nobody said anything. Evander looked at me. I looked at Evander. The mother looked like she wanted the ocean to reclaim her. The child remained completely sincere. Position 3. The universe apparently enjoyed comedy. Then the boy added. He sheds less as a person. The silence somehow became worse. Evander turned and walked away. Fast. I followed several seconds later. Mostly because if I laughed where he could hear me, I suspected I'd regret it. We reached the edge of the harbor. Far enough from the crowd. Far enough from the noise. Neither of us spoke immediately. The sea stretched before us. Gray. Restless. Alive. Then Evander finally said, I do not shed. I looked at him. Very carefully. Of course not. You don't believe me. No. His expression darkened. I smiled. Only a little. For some reason, that made him stare. Longer than necessary. Long enough for the air between us to become something else. Something quieter. Warmer. Dangerous. My pulse betrayed me first. And the moment might have become something neither of us understood yet. If a familiar voice had not spoken behind us. Commander. Everything stopped. Evander went still. Completely still. I turned. And found Corin Vale standing 20 feet away. Smiling. This time, the smile reached his eyes. That was the first truly frightening thing I'd ever seen him do. And suddenly I understood. Corin had recognized the wolf yesterday. Not suspected. Recognized. The realization hit me one heartbeat before Corin spoke again. I've been looking for you. The harbor suddenly felt too small. Too many people. Too many witnesses. Too many ways for everything to go wrong. Corin stood at the edge of the docks with rain still clinging to his coat. His smile never moved. That was the problem. Most smiles changed when people spoke. Corin's didn't. It sat on his face like something painted there. Waiting. Watching. Calculating. Beside me, Evander did not react. Not visibly. The only sign came from the scent that rolled off him. Snow. Steel. And something sharp enough to cut. The temperature of the moment changed immediately. The crowd felt it too. People began backing away without understanding why. Instinct. Alpha instincts often traveled faster than logic. Corin spread his hands. Commander Blackmoor. Silence. The title landed heavily. A few nearby fishermen froze. Others exchanged confused looks. Recognition traveled slowly. Then suddenly very fast. Whispers erupted across the harbor. Commander. Missing. Blackmoor. The names connected. The crowd changed. I hated crowds when they changed. People always looked at heroes differently than they looked at ordinary men. And Evander suddenly looked very tired. Not pleased. Not relieved. Tired. Interesting. Corin took another step forward. You disappeared without explanation. Evander's voice arrived cold enough to frost glass. I was occupied. The smile twitched. Just once. A hit. Small. But real. Corin's eyes shifted toward me. I disliked that immediately. You've been difficult to locate. Evander said nothing. Corin continued. The capital has concerns. I don't care. Another hit. Another crack. The smile almost disappeared. Good. The conversation might have continued there. Except the wrong detail arrived. Again. Something the audience in my life apparently kept placing in front of me. Corin smelled pleased. Not relieved. Not surprised. Pleased. As if finding Evander wasn't success. As if confirming something already known was. The distinction mattered. I didn't know why yet. But it mattered. The realization lodged itself somewhere in the back of my mind. Waiting. Corin finally inclined his head. The Emperor will want answers. Evander's gaze never changed. Then he can ask. The harbor became very quiet. Several fishermen immediately found other places to stand. Reasonable. When two powerful men looked capable of destroying each other socially, ordinary people developed urgent business elsewhere. Corin laughed softly. Then looked at me. That was somehow worse. Ansel. I hated how gently he said my name. You should be careful. The warning landed strangely. Not because of the words. Because of Evander. The scent around him shifted instantly. Possessive. Protective. Dangerous. The change lasted less than a second. Still. I felt it. So did Corin. The smile vanished completely. Interesting. Very interesting. Then Corin left. No dramatic farewell. No threats. No explanations. Just a quiet retreat. Which frightened me more than shouting would have. People like Corin rarely walked away without taking something. The question was what? And I didn't know the answer yet. That bothered me the entire walk back to the lighthouse. The lighthouse felt different after that. Smaller somehow. As though Evander's existence had altered the shape of the rooms. The fire crackled. The seagull glared at everyone equally. Normal things. Comforting things. Necessary things. Evander sat near the window. Watching the sea. Again. Always the sea. I set tea on the table. He looked surprised. You made tea. I possess many talents. Apparently. You sound shocked. I am. Fair. Most people expected disgraced nobles to excel at decorative suffering. Not practical skills. The tea sat between us. Steam curled upward. The silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Which was somehow becoming its own problem. I sat opposite him. Studied him. Evander noticed. Of course he noticed. Nothing escaped him. Ask. The word arrived without irritation. Without defense. Just certainty. I almost laughed. You're impossible. So I've been told. Frequently. Often. That sounded true. I folded my arms. Who cursed you? The silence vanished. Immediately, Evander looked toward the sea again. His jaw tightened. Not dramatically. Just enough. A soldier's reaction. Control under pressure. I knew the shape of it. Because I carried my own version. Political enemies. That's not an answer. No. There you are again. The corner of his mouth moved. Barely. Then disappeared. The moment faded. Something heavier took its place. Finally he spoke. There was an investigation. I waited. Someone was stealing military funds. The room became very still. Interesting. Very interesting. Because I knew exactly what those words felt like. Evander continued. I found evidence. My stomach tightened. So did I. His eyes shifted toward me. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared. Not much. Enough. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The realization settled between us. Two men. Two worlds. The same crime. The same result. Someone powerful steals. Someone honest notices. Someone honest suffers. Remarkable efficiency. Evander looked away first. I was supposed to deliver the evidence. The scent changed. Old anger. Old betrayal. Still bleeding beneath the scar. I never arrived. The missing pieces clicked together. Not all of them. Enough. You were ambushed. Yes. Someone wanted the investigation buried. Yes. The answer came quietly. That made it worse. I stared into my tea. Watching steam rise. Watching my reflection distort. Funny. Different face. Different world. Same story. The realization hurt more than expected. Because part of me had believed things would be different here. Not better. Just different. Instead, corruption apparently possessed excellent travel capabilities. I laughed once. Humorless. Evander watched me carefully. What? I looked up. For a second I considered lying. Then didn't. I died exposing corruption. The words felt strange aloud. Heavy. Real. I lost everything. Evander remained silent. Good. Anything comforting would have ruined it. I woke up here. I stared into the fire. The original Ansel lost everything too. The silence stretched. Then. I know. I froze. What? Evander's expression remained unreadable. I know what they did to you. The room tilted slightly. Not physically. Emotionally. The kind of shift that happens when a truth arrives from a direction you never considered. I laughed softly. Disbelieving. Everyone knows what they think happened. No. The answer cut through the room. Short. Sharp. Certain. Evander leaned forward slightly. The records don't make sense. My pulse slowed. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Because hope often arrived disguised as information. And hope had terrible timing. The treasury reports were altered. I stared. He continued. The numbers don't match. My hands tightened around the cup. Not enough to break it. Enough. The accusation was manufactured. The words landed heavily. I looked away immediately. Toward the fireplace. Toward the wall. Toward literally anything else. Because something embarrassing happened. My vision blurred. Briefly. Very briefly. I hated that. Not because I was crying. Because I wasn't. I was close. Which felt worse. The room remained silent. Evander didn't move. Didn't offer comfort. Didn't pretend not to notice. The restraint mattered. More than sympathy would have. Finally I spoke. My father knew. Not a question. A realization. Evander said nothing. Which was answer enough. The wound landed completely this time. No softening. No excuses. Just truth. Duke Harland Whitlock knew. And let it happen anyway. I set the cup down carefully. Very carefully. because my hands had started shaking. The fire crackled. The sea crashed below the cliffs. The world continued. It always did. That was one of its worst habits. 3 days passed. The lighthouse became strangely crowded. Not with people. With life. Injured sailors arrived. Then left. A fox with a broken paw appeared. Stayed. A fisherman delivered supplies. The seagull declared war on everyone. Routine emerged. Dangerous thing. Routine felt like safety. Safety made people careless. Including me. Especially me. The realization arrived on the 4th morning. With scent. My suppressants were running out. I discovered this while counting vials. Then counted again. As though arithmetic might become charitable. It did not. 3 left. Not enough. I sat at the kitchen table. Staring. The empty box stared back. Neither side won. Eventually I heard footsteps. Evander entered. Paused immediately. His gaze dropped to the vials. Then to me. Then back again. Alpha perception was deeply annoying. You need more. Not a question. I sighed. There goes my plan. What plan? Pretending the problem wasn't happening. His expression remained serious. Unfortunately, because I had been joking. Mostly. The scent around him changed. Concern. Protectiveness. Something warmer. Something that made my skin feel strangely aware of itself. I stood too quickly. Mistake. The room tilted slightly. Only slightly. Still enough. Evander crossed the room immediately. One hand caught my arm. Steadying. Nothing more. Nothing less. The contact lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Long enough. Far too long. Because my body reacted instantly. Heat. Warmth. Awareness. Every nerve suddenly remembered it existed. The realization struck both of us simultaneously. His hand withdrew immediately. Mine remained suspended awkwardly in the air. Excellent. Perfect. No notes. The silence became unbearable. Then, the seagull attacked. Nobody knows why. Least of all the seagull. One moment silence existed. The next a furious bird launched itself directly at Evander's head. The commander of the Imperial Vanguard reacted faster than most soldiers. Not faster than an angry seagull. The bird landed. Claws. Wings. Chaos. Evander swore. I laughed. Actually laughed. Full force. Helpless. The first real laugh in years. The seagull screamed triumphantly. Evander looked personally betrayed. You feed it. The accusation sounded genuine. I do. It hates me. That appears to be mutual. The bird bit him. Evander looked at me. I looked away immediately. For professional reasons. Mostly because if I met his eyes right then, I was going to laugh again. And the moment stretched. Light. Warm. Dangerously easy. Neither of us noticed the rider approaching the lighthouse until much later. By then it was too late. Because the message he carried would change everything. And the seal stamped across the letter belonged to Duke Harland Whitlock. The messenger looked terrified. That was my first clue. Not the Whitlock seal. Not the horse. Not the fact that someone had ridden through half a storm to reach a lighthouse nobody important was supposed to remember existed. The fear. People delivering good news rarely looked like that. I accepted the letter. The messenger immediately looked relieved. Which was my second clue. Do you need a reply? I asked. No. The answer came so fast it nearly collided with itself. Interesting. Very interesting. The man practically sprinted back toward his horse. Within moments he was gone. I watched the road until he disappeared beyond the cliffs. Then looked down at the seal. Whitlock. The wax felt heavier than it should have. Behind me, Evander said nothing. Which was somehow worse. I broke the seal. Read. Then read again. The second time hurt more. A useful talent of Duke Harland Whitlock's. Even in written form. The letter contained no apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the accusation that had destroyed my life. Instead it contained an invitation. a request that I return to the capital. Immediately. The wording was polite. The meaning wasn't. I folded the paper. Carefully. Very carefully. What does he want? Evander already knew. I could tell. The question wasn't curiosity. It was confirmation. He wants me back. The scent around Evander changed. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. He needs something. Yes. Neither of us believed otherwise. I sat at the kitchen table. The letter remained in my hand. The room felt smaller again. Strange. 3 months ago I would have given almost anything for a message from home. Now I wanted to throw it into the fireplace. Growth came from unexpected places. The fire probably deserved the satisfaction. Evander remained standing near the window. Watching me. Not the letter. Me. That should not have mattered. It did. You're not going. The statement arrived with complete certainty. I blinked. That's bold. You don't want to. No. Then don't. I stared. The simplicity annoyed me. Not because he was wrong. Because he was right. Life would have been much easier if refusing people carried no consequences. Unfortunately, consequences remained committed to their profession. I can't ignore this. Why? The question hit harder than expected. Why? Because he was my father? Because some part of me still wanted answers? Because a small stupid section of my heart remained convinced there had to be something worth salvaging? I hated that section. It never learned. The silence stretched. Eventually I said, because I want to know why. Evander's gaze softened. Only slightly. Enough. That somehow made everything worse. Because pity I could reject. Understanding was harder. We left for the capital 3 days later. I told myself the decision was practical. Necessary. Logical. The lie survived approximately 12 seconds. The truth was simpler. I needed to hear it. Needed to hear my father explain why. Needed to know whether abandoning me had cost him anything at all. Human beings make terrible decisions when searching for closure. I had become an excellent example. The journey took 4 days. Long roads, coastal winds, small villages, temporary inns, and entirely too much time spent near Evander Blackmoor. Not that I was counting. I absolutely was. The problem wasn't proximity. The problem was awareness. Once noticed, it became impossible to ignore. The way he always positioned himself nearest the door. The way his eyes tracked every unfamiliar person entering a room. The way his scent changed whenever someone looked at me too long. That last one was becoming a problem. Particularly because I had started noticing it immediately. The inn on the second night nearly killed me. Not literally. Socially. A different category of death. The owner was a cheerful beater in his 60s who possessed exactly 2 hobbies. Cooking. And asking inappropriate questions. We discovered this immediately. He set down dinner. Looked at Evander. Looked at me. Then nodded. Good. Neither of us responded. The man continued. About time. I frowned. About time for what? His expression suggested I was extraordinarily slow. You're both 30. Evander nearly choked on tea. I stared. The owner sighed dramatically. Asking me to believe you're not together is insulting. The silence became immediate. Absolute. The owner kept eating. Unconcerned. Evander looked at the table. I looked at the wall. The wall offered no assistance whatsoever. Finally I managed. We are not. The owner waved a hand. I said I wasn't insulted. That somehow made it worse. The conversation ended there. Officially. Emotionally it remained alive for several hours. I could feel it following us around the inn. Mocking me. Patiently. The capital appeared at sunrise. Stone walls. Silver banners. Crowded streets. Everything familiar. Everything wrong. The city looked exactly the same. I didn't. Funny how that happened. The gates opened. People flowed around us. Merchants. Soldiers. Nobles. Workers. Thousands of lives moving simultaneously. For the first time in months, My scent tightened instinctively. A defensive reaction. Crowds. Judgment. Memory. Evander noticed immediately. Of course he did. The alpha had become alarmingly good at reading me. His horse shifted closer. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me. The gesture landed somewhere dangerous. I looked away before it could mean anything. Cowardly. Practical. Same thing sometimes. The Whitlock estate sat exactly where I remembered. Large. Elegant. Cold. The kind of place designed to impress strangers instead of comfort family. Nothing had changed. The realization hurt. Because some foolish part of me had hoped otherwise. The gates opened. Servants bowed. Nobody smiled. Home. How touching. A servant escorted us inside. Long hallways. Polished floors. Paintings. Memories. Every corner contained one. Most of them unwelcome. The drawing room waited at the end. So did my family. Duke Harland Whitlock stood beside the fireplace. Tall. Controlled. Immaculately dressed. The man who taught me that disappointment could become a personality. Beside him stood Muriel Whitlock. My stepmother. Beta. Professional architect of social destruction. The woman smiled whenever she said something cruel. She was smiling now. Neither greeted me. Interesting. Apparently we were skipping directly to emotional violence. Efficient. Harland looked at Evander first. Not me. Of course. The missing commander mattered. The discarded son didn't. Some habits survived everything. Commander Blackmoor. Evander's expression remained unchanged. Duke. The title sounded more like an accusation. Good. Harland finally looked at me. The room became very quiet. Months. 3 months. No letters. No explanations. No apologies. And now this. I waited. The Duke spoke. You look well. The sentence almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. The cruelty of it arrived in the casualness. As though we had spoken last week. As though exile had been a misunderstanding. As though he hadn't watched my life burn. My hands remained perfectly still. That took effort. Thank you. The lie tasted terrible. Muriel smiled. There it was. That tiny expression. Satisfaction. She enjoyed this. Noted. Filed away. Saved for later. Harland folded his hands. The Treasury investigation has resumed. Straight to business. Of course. I felt something inside me settle. A final piece clicking into place. Because suddenly I understood. The invitation. The urgency. The timing. It had never been about me. Not once. I wasn't a son. I was evidence. The realization should have hurt. Instead it felt strangely peaceful. Like finally identifying the source of a wound. Harland continued speaking. I barely listened. Words. Numbers. Investigations. Political pressure. Excuses dressed as explanations. Then one sentence cut through everything. The accusation may have been incorrect. May. Interesting choice. My vision sharpened. Slowly. Dangerously. I looked directly at him. For the first time since entering the room. And something in my expression must have changed. Because Harland stopped speaking. Good. My voice arrived very softly. When I begged you to investigate. Silence. When I told you I was innocent. More silence. The room felt tighter. Smaller. Did you believe me? Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Harland looked away first. That was answer enough. The blow landed completely. No defense. No excuse. No misunderstanding. He knew. Or suspected. And chose convenience anyway. I stood. The chair scraped softly across the floor. The sound felt enormous. Muriel finally spoke. Ansel. No. One word. Quiet. Final. The room froze. I looked at Harland. Not the Duke. Not the noble. Just the man. I spent 3 months wondering why. My hands had stopped shaking. Interesting. I don't anymore. The silence that followed felt different. Not grief. Not anger. Something ending. Something permanent. I turned. Walked toward the door. Behind me someone called my name. I didn't stop. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't asking them to choose me. And that changed everything. Unfortunately, the moment I stepped into the hallway, I found Corin Vale waiting there, smiling. And in his hand was a folder containing documents I had never seen before. Documents that would prove who had actually stolen the money. Documents someone had been hiding from the beginning. Corin lifted his eyes toward mine. Then said the one thing I never expected to hear. It wasn't your father. It wasn't your father. The words stopped me cold. For a second, I simply stared. Corin stood in the hallway with that same controlled smile. But something was different. Not kindness. Not guilt. Something closer to exhaustion. My eyes dropped to the folder in his hand. Then returned to his face. What? Corin held the documents out. I didn't take them immediately. Trust wasn't a habit I practiced often. Especially not with him. Finally I accepted the folder. Opened it. Read. And felt the floor disappear beneath me. Ledgers. Transfer records. Private correspondence. Treasury reports. Names. Dates. Amounts. Enough evidence to destroy multiple noble families. But one name appeared again and again. Mirel Whitlock. My stepmother. Not Harland. Not the Duke. Miel. The silence stretched. I turned another page. Then another. Each one made things worse. Or clearer. Depending on perspective. Mirel had been siphoning money through shell accounts for years. Carefully. Patiently. Using household authority and social influence to move funds unnoticed. When discrepancies appeared, she needed someone to blame. Someone expendable. Someone convenient. Me. The original Ansel had simply been standing in the wrong place when the scheme began collapsing. A sacrifice. A solution. A shield. I closed the folder. Slowly. Very slowly. Because rage was trying to make decisions on my behalf. And rage had terrible judgment. Why show me this? Corin looked away. For the first time since I'd met him. Because I found the rest. The answer surprised me. Not enough. But some. You helped her. His jaw tightened. Silence. Confirmation. Of course. Nothing was ever simple. Nothing was ever clean. You knew. Not everything. His voice sounded rough. Unexpectedly rough. I thought she was protecting the family. I laughed. Once. Hush. Humorless. The family. The words tasted bitter. Corin flinched. Interesting. Very interesting. Because guilt finally looked genuine. Not performance. Not manipulation. Real guilt. Too late. Still real. Finally he spoke again. The commander was right. My eyes narrowed. What? You were innocent. The hallway became very quiet. A strange feeling moved through me. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Something emptier. Because hearing the truth after being destroyed by a lie wasn't nearly as satisfying as people imagined. Sometimes justice arrived too late to feel victorious. Corin swallowed. You deserve the truth. Then he walked away. Just like that. No dramatic redemption. No excuses. No request for forgiveness. Only departure. I watched him disappear down the hallway. Then looked at the folder again. The evidence felt heavy. Not because of the paper. Because of what came next. Mirel tried to run. That was the funniest part. Not because escape was possible. Because she actually believed it might be. The confrontation happened that evening. In front of witnesses. Nobles. Officials. Imperial investigators. People important enough that the truth couldn't simply disappear. Harland sat at the head of the room. Silent. Pale. Older than I remembered. Funny what reality did to people. The evidence spread across the table. Every page. Every transfer. Every signature. Every lie. Mirel's composure survived almost 20 minutes. Impressive. Then the investigators produced the final ledger. The hidden one. The impossible one. The one proving everything. And she broke. Not dramatically. Not with screaming. With blame. People like Mirel always blamed others first. The servants. The accountants. The circumstances. The pressure. Everyone except themselves. I listened quietly. Watching. Waiting. Then she looked directly at me. Hatred filled her eyes. Pure. Undisguised. Everything would have been fine if you had stayed quiet. The room froze. There it was. The truth. Not money. Not politics. Control. She hated me because I had refused to accept the role she assigned. Because victims became dangerous when they started speaking. The investigators escorted her away. Still protesting. Still blaming. Still refusing responsibility. The doors closed behind her. Silence remained. A long one. Eventually everyone began leaving. One by one. Until only Harland and I remained. Father and son. For the first time in months. Maybe years. He looked tired. I felt nothing. That realization shocked me. Not anger. Not grief. Nothing. The wound had finally scarred over. Harland spoke first. I failed you. I waited. The apology sounded genuine. Unfortunately, because genuine apologies arrived far too late surprisingly often. He continued. I should have listened. Yes. The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No mercy. Just truth. The Duke closed his eyes briefly. The words hit. Good. Some things deserve to hurt. I can't undo it. No. Silence. Then another. Finally Harland looked at me. Not through me. At me. For perhaps the first time. What happens now? I considered the question. Then smiled. A small one. A peaceful one. Now. The answer felt lighter than expected. I go home. The Duke's face changed. Very slightly. Hope. Then confusion. Because he finally understood. I wasn't talking about the estate. I wasn't talking about the capital. I wasn't talking about him. Home had become somewhere else. And that realization hurt him. Good. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted understanding. There was a difference. I left without looking back. The imperial hearing happened 2 weeks later. Public. Crowded. Messy. Exactly the way truth preferred to arrive. The charges against Ansel Whitlock were formally erased. The investigation became public record. The noble gossip circles exploded. Predictably, people who once called me a thief suddenly discovered they had always supported me. Miraculous. Society performed that trick often. I ignored it. Because something more important happened that same day. Evander Blackmoor exposed the conspiracy behind his curse. The political faction responsible had hidden inside the imperial court for years. Powerful people. Connected people. Dangerous people. Not dangerous enough. Evidence destroyed them. The curse makers were arrested. Their allies fell shortly afterward. And for the first time in months, the Empire stopped hunting ghosts. The battle should have been over. Life disagreed. Because 3 nights later Evander disappeared. No warning. No explanation. Nothing. One moment he was there. The next he wasn't. The lighthouse felt enormous afterward. Empty. Wrong. I hated that immediately. The first day I stayed busy. The second I became irritated. The third I stopped sleeping properly. By the 5th day, fear arrived. Not logical fear. The old kind. The familiar kind. The kind abandonment leaves behind. I sat alone beside the lighthouse window, watching storms roll across the sea. Waiting. Again. Always waiting. Part of me knew Evander wasn't like the others. Another part didn't care. Trauma rarely listened to reason. Night fell. The waves crashed below. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just enough. Enough to admit the truth. I loved him. There. Done. Terrible timing. Absolutely disastrous. Then someone knocked on the door. I froze. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. My heart stopped. Started again. I ran. Actually ran. The door flew open. Evander stood outside. Covered in blood. Injured. Exhausted. Alive. For 1 second neither of us moved. Then I hit him. Hard. Directly in the chest. His expression changed to genuine surprise. Good. Idiot. Another hit. We have letters. Hit. Messages. Hit. Words. Hit. The last strike never landed, because Evander caught my wrist. Gently. And suddenly neither of us was breathing correctly. The storm howled behind him. The lighthouse glowed behind me. And the space between us vanished. Not slowly. Not cautiously. Completely. His hand slid to my face. My pulse became useless. Ansel. The way he said my name should have been illegal. I hated it. I loved it. Both. At once. I came back. The words shattered something. A final wall. A final fear. A final doubt. My voice barely worked. You took your time. A smile appeared. Real. Beautiful. Entirely unfair. Then he kissed me. And every lonely thing inside me finally stopped waiting. 6 months later. The lighthouse remained loud. The sea remained dramatic. The seagull remained evil. Some things never changed. Others did. The refuge expanded. Injured sailors arrived regularly. Stray creatures appeared constantly. Children from nearby villages visited often. Life filled every room. Warm. Chaotic. Real. Chosen. The family I found looked nothing like the one I lost. And that was the point. One evening I stood outside watching sunset paint the ocean gold. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind. Evander. Always Evander. I leaned back against him. Comfortable. Safe. Home. The lighthouse lantern illuminated the cliffs. The sea stretched endlessly ahead. And for the first time across 2 lives, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Beside me, the man I loved rested his chin on my shoulder. The wind carried salt and sunlight and possibility. Everything felt quiet. Not empty. Peaceful. The kind of peace earned through loss. The kind nobody could give you. The kind you build yourself. I smiled. The future waited beyond the horizon. For once, I wasn't afraid to meet it.